Hey folks, welcome. We're happy to have you again. It's Dr. Evans with another strategy short. This is a series of videos I put together that kind of review and comment on our never-ending search for the best of the best instructional practices. We're talking about the talk to the hand, no doubt about it, best practices that our teachers use each and every day in our classrooms to affect student achievement. Now remember, our only goal here is for all of us to learn and grow together, right? We want to push each other's thinking, challenge our assumptions, and of course, as always, honor and celebrate the great work happening in your classrooms each and every day. With that being said, let's look at our topic for today, which is a great one. What are the right approaches for students to get quality independent practice time? What does that look like, and how can I do that well as a lesson planner and a mentor to our kids? With that being said, let's jump right into the next slide. Now, before we get into today's topic, I like to always begin here with this slide where we kind of provide a little bit of context. This is a summary slide of 12 key actions or steps that our teachers typically have in place when we observe our most effective teachers in action. These are consistently supported by both research and observation of our teaching professionals. And I'll try to explain each one of these through these videos, and you can jump around whichever video you need to inform your practice. Now, let me just orient you to the visual. These are 12 distinct steps, and they're typically done in this order. What I would say, though, is that some teachers begin and leave at different points. Some teachers begin with explicit practice or explicit instruction and then follow the steps as described, or not. Some teachers begin with inquiry or student exploration and then move into explicit teaching, and that's perfectly fine as well. So whatever fits your needs in your community, I could support, and I hope you review all of these 12 slides and slide presentations to inform your practice. Now let's jump right into today's topic of independent practice. And here you see I have those 12 steps off to the side for you, but also some considerations and some things to monitor in your classroom around this topic of independent practice. The first is remember that high expectations is the end game. Mastery of content and skills is the end game. It's the outcome that we're all after. So if the practice is not leading, the independent student practice is not leading to mastery of skills or concepts, then it's not really being impactful. With that being said, the actual feedback you can give to students around their practice, if it's less than perfect, is to model what you expect of them through Think Aloud, all types of teacher modeling activities, peer-to-peer feedback around where they may have fallen short of mastery. Lots of ways to get there. All I'm saying is the end game here from the independent practice must be improvement and then ultimately mastery of skills and content. Number two, I just think I would ask you to think about the amount of practice, right? My advice is to limit the amount of practice to only the amount the students need to get good at something. And the other thing to think about is that practice can sometimes have your feedback as an instructor, but sometimes not. Students can improve by practicing something with no feedback. Obviously, it's better with feedback, but think about the balance of how much practice versus how much feedback and how much time that's going to take you as an instructor so you maximize the results on the student end. Last consideration is independent versus group practice. A major shift for me as an instructor, as a teacher, was moving from individual student feedback, which we know is best, to group feedback, which really can be very, very effective and certainly is more efficient. So just think about the balance of that in your classroom. That gets us to the two things to monitor, which is pacing. Obviously, too much practice means there could be some time wasted. Also, there are students who move faster than others, right? So what do you do when the student is done practicing and other students are still working the problems or still writing the essay? If that's happening, then maybe a go-to enrichment activity that you have in your pocket is a great idea. So no time, there's not a lot of student downtime. We don't want that. And obviously, the practice needs to lead to somehow, some way you are reviewing the results from that student practice so that you are then giving them feedback, right? And leading them to greater degrees of self-reliance and automaticity. Just some things to think about as we move to our next slide. Now, when we get back to our classrooms and back to our schools, whether you're reflecting individually or maybe as a group PLC, just a couple things to ponder around independent practice. I don't have all the answers for you on this, but I do know these are some things you're going to have to consider as professionals. One is, how am I giving feedback when students have practiced something? What does the actual feedback routine look like? Is it independent feedback for every individual student in the room? Hey, that's awesome, and that's a great strategy. I think there's ways to do that efficiently, but typically it's done inefficiently, right? It takes a long time to give each student independent feedback. So think about group feedback. I think there's a way for you to do that. There's lots of ways for you to do that in your classroom that's more efficient and very, very effective. Just one example of that is, hey, students, I'm going to pull everybody together. I'm going to show you a common misconception I've seen in the responses, right? I've seen this theme or reasoning misstep that you've made that I think maybe we can all correct. So that's what I mean by group feedback. It's something to think about when you set up your routines. And then secondly, how much practice is too much practice, right? There is such a thing as too much practice because it's taking up a lot of time, and the amount of practice is taking up so much time that we're really seeing a diminishing returns on that practice. So less is more with assessment, which we've already talked about in a previous slide presentation. Same with practice. We want to have just enough practice to move learning forward, but not too much. And now, with that being said, let's move to our next slide. Now, as part of these presentations, I like to give you some sort of summary piece of advice that hopefully pushes your thinking a little bit. And in this topic of independent practice, I offer you this advice or suggestion. The most effective way for students to know for sure that they can accomplish something is by practicing it. And then by comparing their answers or their responses to the perfect model, to whatever it is we think is an exemplar or a model response. Because we cannot know for certain what they can do until they show us individually, when they reflect on their own mistakes, and then when they do better the next time. I think a mistake we sometimes make because we're teaching and they're listening is that they're all with us and nodding their heads, and maybe we can think that they know what they know the right answers and they become good at this thing we're teaching them, but we really haven't seen that in evidence. And until we see it in evidence, we don't know for sure. So keep that in mind. Independent practice, a critical part of the learning design. And finally, a quote to leave you with today in our presentation. Here's the thing about teaching. You have to believe deep in your soul that the children are growing and maturing from the lessons you've created or we've created, so that one day, many years from now, they will grow up and become who they are meant to be. I hope that resonates with you. I hope that your journey to be a great, great teacher is an ongoing one. And I hope that these videos support in some small way your work and your professional growth. And I thank you for being with me. Have a good day.